All right, thank you. Okay, good afternoon. You guys been here all day or just getting here? Been here all day?
Yes.
Oh. All right, so I'm sure you're excited to be here, especially extending your day. Man, it is hot outside. It is really hot. All right, I'm Ron Flannery. I'm an independent consultant. I do work with school districts all across the state. I've been here a couple times doing Red Book training for you guys. This is my 20th year of doing it. So how would you like to be associated with the most hated publication in the state of Kentucky for 20 years? Well, that's me. 20 years I've been doing this. So very experienced with it. I've trained probably almost 165 of the 170 some school districts in the state. I'm on my road trip right now, starting last Monday. From last Monday all the way to October, every single day I'm in a school district speaking somewhere doing this right here. And then by the time I get to October is going to be booked too. So I'll probably hit July, August, September, October, and probably the first part of November, where every day I'm out speaking, doing Red Book training. So this is going to be my life for the next 3 or 4 months. I also do a ton of fraud investigations. I've done probably about 60 in the last 15 years. It occurs out there. It happens. Good people make bad decisions. Since I was here last time, I did 2 big ones. I've caught almost $500,000 in fraud here in the last year. I just completed one the 1st of May at a high school in central Kentucky, where a bookkeeper identified $224,000 that she stole from that high school. And honestly, I believe that's just a drop in the bucket. She'd been there 29 years. I could only look back 4.5. And then I had some of her bank statements from another 4.5 years. So I looked at the school stuff for 4.5 years, and then some of her personal records for 4.5 years, and I come up with $224,000 that I identified that she stole. So I testified before the grand jury at the 1st of May. As soon as I testified, they indicted her. The next day, state police picked her up, threw her in jail. Now, she's out of jail now, but I guess the Commonwealth attorney is working through the either a plea deal or going to trial one, and but the Commonwealth attorney said she's not going to accept anything that doesn't require prison time. So this bookkeeper with 29 years, and nobody had a clue she was doing it either. They didn't call me in to do a fraud investigation. The finance officer, like Stephanie here in the district, asked me to come in and just review the schools, see how they're doing. She goes, I'm new here in the district, and I sort of want to get a feel for how the schools are complying with the Red Book. And I really don't think the auditors look at the Red Book as good as they should. And do you think maybe you could come in and review my schools and tell me if they're following the Red Book or not? And if they're not, identify the things they're not doing and then tell them what they're supposed to do. I said, yeah, I do that. I said, I usually do it in in January through the March time frames when I do my reviews. And she says, well, I'd like for you to come in and check all of my schools out. And that's what I did. I was just there checking out the school, seeing if they comply with the Red Book. And after I'd been there about a half an hour, I'd already figured out she was stealing. And then it went into a full-blown fraud investigation, and 2 months later I've identified $224,000 that I can prove she stole. So if I wouldn't have been there, she'd probably still be sitting there at that desk right now stealing monies. She was stealing anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 a year from a school activity fund account. And and they weren't following the Red Book. Internal controls weren't like they're supposed to. So the Red Book exists really for one purpose: keep good people from making bad decisions. And like Stephanie said, the Red Book is being updated. It's hopefully Steve Lyles from KDE, he's over the Red Book at the state. He says hopefully it'll be out by August 1. Now we got finished reviewing as a committee, we got finished reviewing the Red Book probably around January or February. And then he went through the approval process where it's got to go through the superintendent's committee, it's got to go through legal, it's got to go through KSBA, it's got to go through the LRC a couple times, it's got to have public readings. So all that stuff takes time, and he expects the new Red Book to be officially published August 1. So if you see anything in red in my presentation today, that is something new to the old version of the Red Book, an addition to or a change, okay? Now Stephanie asked me that we've got about 2 hours, a little less than 2 hours to go through the information. And if I go through the complete presentation, that takes a minimum 4.5 to sometimes even 5 hours. So I'm going to quickly go through the old information, but then we're going to focus on what's in red, so that all the new stuff. You guys have had a couple years of Red Book training, so everything in black is a standard that's already been in place. Everything in red is a change, an addition to, or a deletion, something new. Okay, so that's what we'll go over today. But I will go through the whole Red Book. All right. I was a little concerned coming into the district because I had someone contact me and said that there was a good possibility that a principal was stealing monies in this district. And I'll go ahead and say what school it was. It's the preschool.
Oh my God.
Jess? Was that the name? They said it was Jess.
Yesterday, huh?
Yeah, I met your husband. I'm just kidding. I trained her husband yesterday. He says, I want you to scare, he goes, I want you to scare my wife. I said, really? He goes, yeah. So I said, what's her name? He goes, Jess. He goes, get her good. I said, well, I'll do that. That's when I start talking about fraud. I said, I'll throw the preschool in there. Okay, all right. So with budgets, you guys know you have to prepare a budget every year. And your budget is just an educated guess to what your activity fund expenditure is going to be for each account. The changes to the budget is that they did put a date that budgets have to be sent up to the board, and that's May 1. The old Red Book said the month of May. Now they specifically said your budgets, your tentative activity fund budgets, have to be sent up to the board by May 1. The old Red Book said that you had to send up the individual activity account budget worksheets and the principal's combining budget. Well, now the only thing that the Red Book is requiring you to send up, bookkeepers and principals, is the principal's combining budget. Just that one page, or it may be a couple pages depending on how many accounts you have. So you don't have to send all those individual activity account budget worksheets up, just the principal's combining budget. And that has to be up by May 1. So your budgeting process in the spring, probably around March, April, that's when you prepare your activity account budgets. Bookkeepers, you probably print those out of your computer. You guys have EPS, don't you? Mm-hmm. So you print your budget worksheets out of the computer. Did you guys know you could do that? Mm-hmm. You go into reports, special financial, and then prior year's budget worksheets, I think that's what it's called. Click on that and it'll print out a worksheet for every single activity account you have. It'll print out basically that information right there. It'll tell you last year's receipts, last year's expenditures, then it's got a spot for next year's budget for expenditures and receipts. Give those to your sponsors, teachers, and coaches, let them develop their budget. You get them back, and then you enter the budgets in the computer, then you print your principal's combining budget out. So bookkeepers, you shouldn't have to manually do anything when it comes budget time other than enter the information in the computer, okay? But the principal's combining budget is what has to be submitted to the board for the month, for May 1, okay? And then you've got 30 days of school starting to adopt that budget as your working budget. So I always tell principals, either in July or August site-based meeting, just run that through your site-based council, that tentative budget that the board approved in the month of May, and adopt it as your working activity fund budget. So when you officially adopt that, then you went through the budgeting process. In the spring you prepare it, May 1 you present it to the board, and then within 30 days of school starting, you adopt it as your working budget, and that's the budgeting cycle. Okay? Any questions on budgets? All right. District activity funds. Now, this is a whole new brand new section in the Red Book. Now, one good thing about it is, since I've been training you guys, the guidelines that I put out several years ago are the guidelines that's in the Red Book. Nobody had any guidelines, so whenever we started talking about it, Steve asked me, said, I know you created some guidelines. Why don't we as a committee go through your guidelines, and then maybe we'll change some things. But whatever you've been putting out for the years, we'll put that in the Red Book. So it sounds good to me. So I have presented this information to you, so it shouldn't really be new, okay? Now, what are district activity funds? District activity funds are non-student generated funds collected at the school level to be used for operating costs. So if you have activity fund monies at the school that students didn't generate, as long as the students' parents didn't generate it, you can sweep that up to the board, and you put that in, Stephanie, what fund? Fund 21 or 20? Fund 22. And then you can pay for things like operating expenses up at the district level, because you cannot pay for an operating expense at the school level. Activity fund money is exactly what it's called, what it is. Activity fund money. It's there to support student activity, not pay for operating costs. So if you're going to pay for an operating cost, it has to be ran through Munis up at the board and not through your school activity fund account. You can't pay for any operating costs down at the school. Now, what's an operating cost? Operating costs are the expenses which are related to the operation of a school district or to the operation of a device, a component or piece of equipment or facility. So things you just have to run your facility, your equipment, the building, your fields, your basketball court, you know, those just expenses that you have just to operate. Those are operating costs. Then it goes on to say, they are the cost or resources used by a school district just to maintain its existence. Well, why do we exist? We exist to educate that kid in the classroom, give them an education. So if it's a cost that we have to educate that kid in the classroom, then that's an operating expense. You know, the instruction, the curriculum, the textbooks. So what are some examples of operating costs? Textbooks, required technology, instructional materials, office supplies, school forms, postage, copy paper, copiers, furniture, cell phones, software agreements, handheld radios, carpet, scoreboards, school signs. Basically things that you have to operate. And then if it's something you have to have that's tied to the instruction or the curriculum, that's an operating expense, okay? Because what we do is educate kids in the class. So if it's an expense we have to educate that kid in the class, then that's an operating cost. Now if it's something extra, something we don't have to have, then that's activity. And that's your extracurricular activities, your clubs, your athletics, you know, your pictures, yearbook, you know, field trips, you know, things like that. Fundraisers, that's all activity, okay? Now, one thing, there's a couple things that I went over in prior years that I said were operating expenses that the committee changed this past spring. We took library books off of operating expenses. We took playground equipment off of operating expenses. We took band equipment off of operating expenses. So since those three things aren't operating expenses anymore, you can pay for those things at the school, okay? Now, you know you can't fundraise for an operating expense, at least students and parents can't. So now that means, since that's not an operating expense, students and parents can fundraise for playground equipment and library books and band equipment. Okay, so you don't have to have your external group, your PTO, run your fundraiser for textbooks and things like that. So if you, well, not textbooks, for playground equipment and band equipment. So if you want to have a fundraiser with the kids selling stuff to raise money for playground equipment and it goes through your activity account, you can do that now. okay? And you don't have to sweep your book fair money up to the board anymore to pay for library books. And the same way with your lost library book fees. That can stay down at the school now, okay? Because library books aren't considered operating expenses anymore, all right? Now, just because I have this listed up here doesn't necessarily mean these items are always operating expenses. Here's an example. Say handheld radios. If you're going to buy handheld radios to communicate with your staff in the school, you know, the teacher that's out on bus duty, the custodian, well, that's just part of doing business. That's an operating expense. That's something you just have to operate. So you would have to use your district activity fund monies or your SBDM funds to buy those handheld radios. Well, what if the football coach says, well, I need handheld radios so that I can communicate with my staff during games on the sidelines. I can talk to the offensive coordinator that's sitting up in the press box, and then so we can communicate. Well, that's activity. So you could use activity fund money to buy those handheld radios because that's for activity purposes, okay? But if you're going to buy those handheld radios just for the school staff to use, just to operate, then that's an operating cost, okay? So there can be an exception. Say postage. If you're going to buy stamps to mail out your bills, correspond with your parents, just to your everyday stuff that you mail, that's an operating expense. That you have to use your district activity fund monies or your SBDM monies to buy those stamps. Now the yearbook sponsor says, well, I got to mail these proofs to Jostyn. Yearbook is activity, so the stamps and the postage for the yearbook could come out of yearbook activity fund money because that's activity, okay? So you see there can be an exception if it truly is for activity instead of an operating expense purpose, okay? But traditionally, these are the things that would be considered operating expenses, all right? Now, safety-related equipment and supplies. Those are operating expenses. Now, but there could be exceptions there too. Now, if you're going to buy first aid supplies for your nurse's station, safety signage for the school, those are operating expenses. You got to use district activity fund or SBDM monies or district monies to buy those things. Now, if the athletic trainer says, I need pre-wrap and tape to tape ankles, and then also need, you know, some first aid kits for the sidelines during games, that's activity. So the trainer could use activity fund money to purchase first aid supplies for athletics because that's activity. So you see there can be an exception there. But if you're just getting first aid supplies for the nurse's station, safety signage for the school, that's going to have to come out of monies at the district level. Your SBDM funds, your district activity funds, or either district monies. Okay? All right, repairs and maintenance to the buildings, grounds, gym floor, and fields. Now that one's pretty black and white. That's an operating expense. There's no exception there. So if you're going to pay for repair and maintenance facilities, your fields, your basketball court, your gym, your buildings, that's an operating expense. That has to be paid for with a district or SBDM funds or district activity fund monies, okay? Structural additions or improvements to the buildings and grounds. That one's black and white too. If you're going to pay for that, it's got to be paid for with non-activity fund monies, okay? Items permanently attached to the structure or a school facility. So your scoreboards, your mats that get permanently attached to the walls, a sign out in front of the school. Those are permanently attached. You could probably buy the net for a basketball goal, but not the pole and the backboard, that's mounted to the ceiling along with the rim, that's all permanent. Okay, so but you could buy the net. Everything else you'd have to use district monies because that would be considered an operating expense. Okay? And then professional development and staff development. You can pay for required trainings that sponsors and coaches have to be over a student group, but if it's professional development, then that has to be paid for with district monies, either your SBDM funds or your district activity fund monies. All right? So an example, today's training, that would have to be paid for with district monies. But if your coaches needed CPR training or that national coaches certification, that $75 national coaches certification that they have to have before they can coach a student group. That is a required training, so you can pay for those trainings with activity fund monies. But if your football coach wants to go to a football clinic, or your soccer coach wants to go to a soccer clinic, that's not required training, that's professional development. That would have to be paid for with non-activity fund monies, okay? So if you have a guidance counselor going to a conference, you'd have to pay for that with district monies. A teacher going to a conference, or a counselor going to a conference, that's all PD. Cannot pay for it with activity fund monies, all right? But required trainings you can. So these are operating expenses. These are things that you should not be paying for with your activity fund monies, all right? So principals, I always tell principals, when you're signing a check, it should pretty much always be for activity. If it's an operating expense and you're signing that check, then you've used the wrong monies. You should have been using your SBDM funds or your district activity fund monies, or the district one should be paying for it because it's an operating expense, okay? So principals, bookkeepers, when you sign checks, they should always be for activity, and the only exception there would be stuff you pay for. It comes out of your flower fund or your staff vending account, okay? Okay, now, a change here. Bookkeepers, you've got 60 days of when you receipt that money into your activity account to sweep the money up to the board. And sweeping the money up is basically writing a check to the board and telling Stephanie, put this in Fund 22, and then we'll do a board PO to spend that money. Okay? So you've got 60 days. You can't keep that money in your activity account all year, and then at the end of the year sweep it up. You got 60 days of when you receipt that money into your activity account. Before you, once you exceed that 60 days, you can't send it up anymore. So you got to do it before the 60 days is up. So that's something new. Now, if you have, there's some funds that you have to sweep up to the board because you've collected it for an operating purpose. Okay? Since you collected it for an operating purpose, you have to sweep that money up to the board. So this group of monies are monies that you have to send up to the board because you collected it for an operating purpose. Locker fees, parking fees, class fees, textbook rental fee, lab fee, technology fee, or any other fee that's collected for general instruction. All right? Now notice, I didn't say anything about an extracurricular fee. I didn't say anything about a band fee. I didn't say anything about an athletic fee. Those fees can stay at the school because that's for activity. But if it's tied to instruction, a class, parking or locker fee money, then that money is for an operating expense, then that has to be swept up to the board to be spent. Okay, so it's important if you're charging a fee that you got it labeled for exactly what it is. Okay, because if you call it an instructional fee, then it's supposed to be spent on instruction. Instruction is an operating expense. You got to sweep it up to spend it. Okay. All right, lost textbook fees. Now notice it doesn't say lost textbook fees and lost library book fees anymore. Library books are not operating expenses anymore, so you can pay for that at your activity account. So if you collect money for lost library books, now you can keep it down at the school, okay? Donations. If you receive a donation specifically for an operating expense or instructional materials, then you got to sweep that up to the board, okay? So if somebody donates you money for a sign out in front of the school, you got to sweep that up to the board. Somebody gives you a $100 donation for instructional supplies, you got to sweep that up to the board, okay? Because they donated it for an operating purpose, all right? Staff-generated fundraisers for operating expenses. Now, students and parents can't fundraise for operating expenses if the money's going through your activity account. Now, if it's going through a PTO, or a booster club and they want to fundraise for an operating expense, they can because they're external. But if it's going through the school, students and parents can't fundraise for operating expenses, but the staff can. So if the staff wants to have a fundraiser for an operating expense purpose, then if they raise it for that purpose, then they're going to have to sweep the profits up. You know, like a fundraiser, like say you have dances. You want to have some dances to raise money to pay for Chromebooks for the classrooms. You could do that. Staff's working it. As long as the students and the parents didn't work it, and the staff works it, you could have a fundraiser for an operating expense. Say something like Kona Ice. Kona Ice comes out, parks in front of the school. Kids buy it, but they're not selling it. So it's not student generated. So the profits from Kona Ice could be for an operating expense. Say a fall festival. If you get the staff to work the fall festival, not the students' parents, then the profits from the fall festival could be for an operating expense if you want it. Okay? So you can have fundraisers for operating expenses, but the staff has to work it. Okay? All right, so those are monies that you have to sweep up. And the reason you have to sweep them up to the board is because you collected them for an operating purpose. Okay? All right, now what funds do you have a choice that you can send up? Can means principal, you have a choice. You keep it at the school, or you can sweep it up to the board. Now, when you sweep activity fund money up to the board and label it as district activity fund money, you have a lot more flexibility how you can spend that money. As long as it's, I guess as long as it meets that educational purpose, you can pay for about anything up at the district level. As long as it meets that educational purpose. Okay? At the school, it has to be used for activity, student activity. So you're pretty restricted what you can do with it at the school. But now remember, if you collect money for a purpose, then you have to spend it for that specific purpose. So if you collect parking fee money, when you send it up to the board, you still have to pay for something parking related because the board approved it for parking fees to be spent on parking related stuff. If they have an instructional fee that the board approves and you collect it and you send it up to the board, you still have to spend it on instruction, okay? But if you have non-specific monies that you may have, like a school store or a bookstore, if the students aren't working it, you can send that up and spend it on about anything you want, okay? Or you keep it at the school, spend it on activity. So as long as the students and the parents aren't working the school store or the bookstore, then the profits from that could either stay at the school or it could be sent up. Same way with gate receipt monies. Gate receipt monies can be sent up or stay at the school. Picture profits. Here's one way for elementary schools to have a little bit of district activity fund money. Your picture profit monies aren't student generated. They're not parent generated. You send a form home, parent buys them. You don't have kids going door to door selling pictures. So that's not considered student generated. So the picture profit monies you could send up and pay for about anything with it at the district level. But if you keep it at the school, you have to spend it on student activity. So you see you're pretty restricted there. Disability termination checks. Those little $15 checks you get from the Kentucky State Treasurer for processing that paperwork. You can either keep it at school, spend it on activity, or you can sweep it up to the board, use it for operating expenses. Advertising revenue in the gym or on the fields. So those banners. If the coaches and the athletic directors are the ones doing the soliciting for those signs and banners, then that money could either be sent up to the board to pay for operating expenses, or it could stay at the school to pay for activity. Okay? Usually that athletic money, if they send it up, they're paying for like maintenance things or a remodel or things that they can't pay for at the school. You can pay for all your equipment, your travel, your uniforms, your supplies, your meals for the kids. You know, you can pay for all that at the school level. If you're going to sweep gate money up or advertising money up, usually they'll pay for maintenance type items for athletics. Okay? And then any other funds that aren't generated by students or parents, you can either keep at the school or sweep up to the board. Okay? So principals, those are the monies that you have a choice. You can either keep it at the school, spend it on activity, or send it up to the board and use it for operating expenses. Okay? Now, what funds have to stay at the school? If you have any money generated by the students or the parents, if they're working the fundraiser, selling or soliciting, then that money has to stay at the school and be spent on activity. So principals, that means if you're having a fundraiser in the school that's going through the school activity fund checking account, and the students and parents are working it or raising it, then it has to be for student activity. Students and parents can't fundraise for operating expenses for fundraisers that the school is doing, okay? If a PTA, PTO, Booster Club wants to have a fundraiser for an operating expense and the kids do it and the parents help, that's fine. But the school can't. Through the school, kids and parents can only fundraise for activity. Now, so what funds have to stay at the school? If you have fundraisers where the kids and parents are working, selling, soliciting, that money's got to stay at the school and be spent on activity. Your field trip, your class trip money, your athletic trip money stays at the school. Any club dues or monies designated for a specific club, group, or class, that money stays at the school to support that activity. And then your faculty vending, your hospitality funds, your faculty vending, or your flower fund, that stays at the school, okay? So that sort of explains district activity funds. It's official now, it's in the Red Book. So these are the guidelines that you have to follow for handling those district activity fund monies. So you know what has to go up, what you have a choice, and then what has to stay down at the school. Okay, anybody got any questions on that? Yeah.
Mine is about background checks.
Okay, a background check would be considered an operating expense.
Well, when the parents pay money so that they can go on a field trip, I have that as one of my activities is background checks.
Okay.
And then I just take the money and like every so often write a check to the Kentucky State Treasury and roll it up.
Okay, so
they have it in their...
So if it is for activity related, then I guess you could do that. But if it were just for the hiring of your positions, then that would be an operating cost. So it's for parent involvement for activities, huh? It's parent involvement for activity. So that could be activity related. You keep that down at the school and then write your check for that.
That's what I do.
That'd be okay. Yeah, that'd be okay. Now, if it were background checks for your staff or somebody that's an employee there, then that becomes an operating expense. But if it's for activities, you know, field trips, chaperoning, that's activity related, so I wouldn't see that being a problem, keeping that at school and spending it at the school. Okay, that's a good question. Any other questions on it? All right. Now, the Red Book has specific procedures on how you handle this money now. Back in 2013, whenever the state recommended all schools starting to use district activity funds, they didn't give you any guidance on anything. They just said you can't pay for operating expenses at the school. They had nothing in writing. Well, now we got procedures in writing on how you're supposed to handle your district activity funds. Still wants you to receipt that money in at school level. State doesn't want you guys taking cash up to Stephanie and giving it to her and say, here, put this in your district account. They want the money to flow through the activity account so that you have good accountability. Because if you got some money going up to the board, some money going through the activity account, and people at different positions making that decision on where it goes, then pretty soon you lose accountability because you don't know if it goes up to the board, you don't know if it's going down to the school. You know, the principal may ask, what happened to this gate money from last night's game? AD could say, oh, we sent that game up. What about next week's? Well, we're going to keep that game here, okay? There is no specific guidelines on how much you have to send up or you have to be consistent. The only guideline is you've got 60 days from receiving it to send it up, if you want to send it up. Yeah.
I have a question about donations.
All right.
So if the principal is not allowed to accept a donation over a certain dollar amount?
Then it would have to go up.
Yeah, okay. We did not want to put it in a checking account because it looks as though we've accepted it.
Right. That would have to come directly up to the board because they're not allowed to accept it over a certain threshold, and then that would have to come directly up to the board. Yep. Okay, so they still want you to receipt those monies that you are eventually going to sweep up into your activity account. They want you to receipt it into the normal account that you would typically receipt that money into, okay, for accountability purposes. Okay? It's important that you receipt that money in. If it's gate receipt money and you put it in the general athletic account, then all your gate receipt money gets receipted into the general athletic account. Not just the games you're going to keep at the schools, but the games you're going to send up, you'd put them somewhere else. No, you put them all in the typical account that you would normally receipt the money in. Okay? Then, now bookkeepers, this is something you're going to have to do if you don't already have this. You have to have at least one account identified as a district activity fund sweep account. So if you don't have an activity account already labeled as a DAF sweep account, when I say DAF, I'm referring to district activity fund. If you already don't have one account labeled as a DAF sweep account, then you need to create one. And then for the money that you're going to transfer or sweep up to the board, you have to transfer that money out of your normal activity account that you receipted into that DAF sweep account, and then you write the check out of that DAF sweep account and send it up to the board. Okay? Everybody got that? So you receipt the monies into the normal activity account that you always do. Then when you want to send it up, sweep it up, you transfer it out of that normal account to the DAF sweep account, and then you write your check out of that DAF sweep account. And you've got 60 days to do that from when you receipt it. So probably what I would recommend is just monthly. If you're going to send any money up, you transfer it to your DAF sweep account, and then you write a check and you sweep it up. And that's pretty much what it says. You transfer it at the end of each month. You write one check to the district office for the total monies in that DAF sweep account. And that means that DAF sweep account will be zeroed out by the end of each month. Okay? But remember, you got 60 days. You got 60 days to do that. Okay? Now, we created a monthly submission form so that you have a piece of paper that will tell Stephanie how that money was generated at the school and then how you want it receipted in at the district level if she has different revenue codes. So this may be a form that you modify yourself with your different revenue codes on there. And that monthly submission form looks similar to this. This is what's going to be in the red book. Okay? The top portion just is saying, where did that money come from? How did you receipt that? Where did that money generate? What generated those monies that you're sending up? You know, was it student fee money? Was it textbook money? Was it library, technology, or supply money? Was it a donation? Was it a fundraiser for an operating expense? Was it from the school store? Was it from concessions? Was it from athletic gate receipts? Was it picture profits? Was it advertising revenue? Or is it other? So what you're doing is you're just identifying where that money came from. Because one thing that Stephanie needs to make sure is if you guys are sending money up, that it's not student generated. And that right there will say, hey, it's not student generated, here's how we generated it, okay? Down here, this bottom half is just telling Stephanie how you want that money receipted in as far as a revenue code for Fund 22, okay? And we just have 5 generic ones up here that you may want to use. You don't have to, that's your call. Some districts have no revenue codes, they just put it into District Activity Fund, Fund 22, or they have several different revenue codes if you want to break it down. That's up to you. And we have instruction, athletics, professional development, library/technology, and then building maintenance. You know, that's just the 5 general categories. And if you want to change those, you can. Okay? And then, so what bookkeepers, what you do is, this is sort of like your standard invoice. Okay? This will be your supporting documentation for that expenditure. And then you do a PO, then you sweep the money up to the board at the end of the month, basically. Then when you want to spend that money out of Fund 22, you just do a board purchase order like you do your SBDM monies. Okay? And then that last bullet just says carrying monies over at year end is up to the district's policy. Okay? So what's sort of your guidance on district activity fund monies? Do you want them to spend a lot up or just what they need, or?
We try to limit the dollar amount that we just left up, but we'll carry forward some.
Yeah. Okay. All right, now what if they send money up? Do they have to spend it by year end?
No.
Okay, so they can carry some money over. Yeah, okay, everybody got that? So don't feel that if, you know, you gotta spend it or you lose it, okay? But then, once again, you don't want to send a bunch of money up if you're not going to spend it through that. But then on the flip side, you got 60 days, or when you receipt it, to make that decision if you want to send it up or not, okay? So that is one big change in the requirement. You've got 60 days.
Is it a consistent decision?
Doesn't have to be consistent, no. So if you just say, you know, I think prior direction was, if you're going to send gate money up, you got to set a percentage and you got to consistently do that. There's nothing in the Red Book says you have to do that. So it's just a choice. If you want to send it up, as long as you're running it through the, you know, the normal account, transferring it, send it up, then you can do that. Okay. Okay, so that's district activity funds. Okay, pretty easy. Shouldn't be anything new to you because that's what you guys, that's the information I always gave on district activity funds. The only thing that I didn't go over with you guys were procedures. So the procedures will be completely new to you, okay? And bookkeepers, that's something you're going to have to deal with. Okay, receipts. Now, even though this is stuff that's in the black and it's old stuff, it's so important that I really want to stress this, because I think there's 3 internal controls in the Red Book principles that are so important that you got to make sure your staff understands it and follows them religiously. And I call those 3 internal controls my 3 biggies. And I'll tell principals, if there's anything in the Red Book that you go back and educate your staff on and make sure they do it religiously, are these 3 biggies. And my first biggie is this right here. Any money that they collect has to be turned in daily with the proper supporting documentation. Okay? And the proper supporting documentation is the multiple receipt form. They can't hold their money. If they hold it, it's eventually going to get stolen. Somebody's going to spend it. Something's going to happen to it. So make your staff turn their money in daily. Tell them you have to turn it in daily. There's no amount of money you're allowed to keep in your classroom. Now, if they keep money in their classroom, where do they put it? Top middle desk drawer. Maybe if they're right-handed, they put it in their right-hand drawer. If they're left-handed, they might put it in their left-hand drawer. But it's right there in that desk. Kids know there's money's in that desk if there's money in the classroom. Your custodians that work 3rd shift, they know if there's money in the classroom, it's in those desk drawers. People wandering your halls after school, they know if there's money in the classroom, it's in that teacher's desk drawer. And there's probably not a person in here that hasn't heard of a situation where money's been stolen out of a classroom. And if that teacher, that sponsor, that coach would have turned it in daily like they're supposed to, it wouldn't have got stolen. So you got to turn your money in daily with the proper supporting documentation, and that's the multiple receipt form. My second biggie, every single time money's turned in, your staff has to know that they get a computer-generated receipt back from the bookkeeper. That computer-generated receipt is the bookkeeper's proof that she entered it in the system and it's accounted for. Now in this district, do all the bookkeepers print your receipts out of the computer? Nobody handwrites receipts, do they? Okay, you shouldn't be. All right, so when you enter that receipt in the computer and you print it out, you got to take that money to the bank, don't you? Because if you don't, you're not going to balance to your bank statement. You ever go to a fast food restaurant and see a sign like that on the cash register? It says, if you don't get a receipt, your purchase is free. You ever see a sign like that on the register? Why do they want you to get a receipt? To make sure that you have proof you paid for that hamburger? Or in case you bring one back, you got a receipt to prove it? No. They want you to get a receipt because it forces the cashier to ring it up in the register. That cashier ringing it up in the register makes it accountable. What had happened at that restaurant before you ate there, they had a cashier let people come through the line. They'd take their money, but they wouldn't ring it up in the register. They may stick it in the register, but after the customer walks away, they'll take it back out. Because they didn't ring it up, they steal it, store doesn't know, because it wasn't ringing up in the register. So they're using you, the customer, as an internal control to make sure you get a receipt. Because if you get a receipt, then it has to be ringing up in the register and it's accounted for. The cashier can't steal it. That's why they want you to get a receipt. This was at an Arby's in Benton, Kentucky. I just got through doing a Red Book session last year, and I stopped at Arby's to get a sandwich, and I talk about this all the time. So I saw that on the register. I said, I'm going to take a picture of that and use it. So I just took a picture of it and I plugged it into the training session. But that's why they want you to get a receipt. So it's the same premise at the school. Every time I have bookkeepers steal money, one thing that they will do is when the staff turns money into them, they'll just take that multiple receipt form and throw it away. Or either hide it, not write a receipt for it, and just steal the money. If they throw it away, there's no record of the money coming in. And if you don't get a receipt, you don't know if it's been entered in the system. But if you make sure your staff knows to get a receipt every time, now in a perfect world, when your staff goes to the bookkeeper, they get the receipt that very second. Now, bookkeepers, does that happen every time? No. But you do have to write that receipt that day. You have to write the receipt that day. So if they don't so principals tell your staff, if you don't get a computer-generated receipt the very second you turn the money in, it should be in your mailbox the next morning waiting on you. And if it's not in the mailbox, then you need to go to the bookkeeper and ask where it's at. Because that bookkeeper hadn't given you proof that money was entered in the system. Okay? So that's biggie number 2. Make sure your staff knows every single time they turn money in, they get a receipt back, if not the second they turn it in their mailbox the next morning. Now, most of the staff and bookkeepers, you hear this all the time. When you give them a receipt, what do they say? What do I do with it? Where do I put it? What's this for? You know, I don't need that. I trust you. They don't know why they're getting it. They don't even want it. You know, but if the principal tells them like they're supposed to, then the staff person will say, yeah, here's my receipt that Stephanie's supposed to give me. Here's Stephanie's proof that she entered it in the system. They should know why they're getting that receipt. But principals, if you don't tell them, they're going to say the same thing. Well, why do I get this? I don't need that. And they don't really understand what the purpose of that receipt is for. But it's to ensure that the bookkeeper enters it in the system. That bookkeeper that stole that $224,000, she never gave her staff receipts back. Never. I had one journalism teacher in that school that had been there 25 years, and she said the 25 years that she was there, she never got a receipt from the teacher. From the bookkeeper. Never got a receipt back from the bookkeeper. And the journalism teacher did the yearbook, done the journalism club, the school paper, so she handled a lot of money. She never got a receipt. Nobody in that school ever got a receipt stub back from that bookkeeper. If they would have, and if the principal had made sure that happened, she would have been able to steal all the money she was stealing. Okay, that's biggie number 2. Biggie number 3, if your staff's going to buy something, they got to get what first? PO, period. Nobody buys anything without a PO. I always tell principals, never give verbal approval for somebody to purchase something. If you tell somebody, if a coach comes up to you and says, hey, can I buy these socks for my team? I need money I need to use my activity fund money to buy socks for this baseball team. And if you say yes, you know what's going to happen? That coach is going to go out and buy them without a PO. And about 2 weeks later, your bookkeeper is going to get an invoice and she's going to say, hey, Coach Flannery, you bought these socks for the baseball team. Where's your PO? And you know what I'm going to say? Principal told me I could buy it. Now I'm off the hook. So don't give verbal approval, principals. First words out of your mouth should be, where's your purchase order? Bring me a PO and I'll approve it. Or you could say no, but most likely you're not. But the first words out of your mouth should be, where's your purchase order? Don't come to me and ask me something if you don't have a PO. Then you can approve the PO, then they're allowed to buy it. Okay? So that's biggie number 3. So that's the 3 biggies, 3 internal controls that I feel are extremely important. If you can make your staff do those 3 things religiously, you got 90% of the red book licked. Okay? All right. Bookkeepers not allowed to collect money from parents or students. Bookkeepers aren't allowed to handle the mail. All right? Everybody understands why you can't do that. Multiple receipt form. Now, you see that change right there? Students 6th grade and above must sign the form. So elementary school principals and bookkeepers, you're going to love that. So kindergartners, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, the teachers can sign for them.
Can we have a little celebration?
Okay, now I modified most of the forms. Here's the new multiple receipt form. I even put a little line up here. It says grade, circle 1, K through 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, or either multiple. So that way your auditor knows if it's K through 5, teacher's going to fill it out for them. But if it's 6 or above, students should be either signing their name or they can print their name, because now it says signature or printed name. Remember up here where it used to say fundraiser? I changed that to purpose, so it doesn't say fundraiser anymore. I added a column for check number. So there's a spot now for check number on it. I was tired of looking at multiple receipt forms that have check marks on them instead of dollar amounts. So I changed it to cash amount, check amount. Not a check mark, all right? And then down here where in the middle it used to say number of students, I got rid of that because you can look at the numbers on the side to tell how many students. So there's the new multiple receipt form, okay? Now, the state also suggests to make your multiple receipt form a 2-part form. Have you guys done that? Everybody done that? Everybody should have. You should be using 2-part forms. You don't have to, but it's recommended. Now here's why. Here's why you do that. Every time I have a bookkeeper stealing monies, they will take that multiple receipt form and throw it away and steal the money. Because when they throw that multiple receipt form away, they know that's the only piece of paper that can prove that money exists. And if they throw it away and there's no record of it, then the coach, the teacher, the sponsor can't even prove they turned the money in. You make it a 2-part form, and you make sure the staff always keeps their yellow copy, then that bookkeeper will always know that the staff has a copy of what they turned in, and they'd be less likely to take the money. Okay? So that's why you make it a 2-part form. So the way this is supposed to work, when your staff brings you money, bookkeepers, you sign and date this, and that staff person, that teacher, that coach, that sponsor never walks out of your office without their yellow copy. Now, do we have any schools here where your teachers send money up in a binder or a folder every morning? Do we have any schools that do that? Okay, we have one, or a couple. If they're going to put their money in a folder and send it up, then I'd probably tell them to keep their yellow copy. They only send the white, because we want to make sure that teacher never walks away from their yellow copy. If they're giving you both the yellow and the white, and then later on that day you're stapling the receipt stub to the yellow and you're giving it back to them, you're defeating the whole purpose of this being a 2-part form. We always want them to walk away with their yellow copy. Okay, that's the way it's supposed to work. All right. Okay. Endorse your checks, stamp them for deposit only when you get them, and you're supposed to put your supporting documentation with the receipt stub. So your ticketed sales report, your multiple receipt form, or your concession form at Form 17 should always be stapled to your receipt stub, and you file it in receipt numerical order monthly. Okay, that's something new that they put in the Red Book. Okay, you only have one checking account. The only time you can have another check account is if you have charitable gaming. Deposit slips, everybody knows you got to line list your checks or photocopy them. You got to write your receipt numbers on the deposit slip, and you got to have 2-party verification of your daily deposit. Now you should deposit your money daily. This hasn't changed. This is all the same. If you take in less than $100, you don't have to deposit it that day. You still have to write your receipts that day. But once you exceed $100, bookkeepers, then you have to deposit your money. Now your staff doesn't have a $100 threshold. That threshold is only the bookkeepers. If they collect less than $100 from the whole staff, then they don't have to take it to the bank until they exceed that $100 threshold. Okay? School's not a bank, you're not allowed to cash checks. You probably don't charge return check fees because your bank probably doesn't charge you a return check fee. I don't think, do they? Yeah. They do? So if you do charge a return check fee, you just have to have signage posted.
We have a contract, we're not supposed to charge. Yeah, we've never been so. We've never charged it. No fees.
So does your bank charge you a fee when you have a check that bounces? They charge you back for the check amount, but not a fee.
No, and then it comes back on the next month.
But you don't have a fee, an additional fee you get charged. So don't charge the parent a fee or a charge. Okay. NSF checks, bookkeepers, you post them as a negative income journal adjustment. Now, grant monies. If you get a check that says it's a grant, that's got to go directly up to Stephanie at the board. Okay. These are monies right here that you're not allowed to receipt into your activity account. There's no sweeping of these monies. These are monies like a donation that's above your threshold. It's got to go directly up to Stephanie. You're not allowed to deposit grant monies, daycare fees, adult education fees, or tuition fees in your activity fund checking account. Those have to be deposited into a district account, okay? So if you get a Walmart grant, a Lowe's grant, anything that says it's a grant, whether it's federal or state or local, that's got to go up to Stephanie, all right? All student fees and charges have to be adopted by the board, and something new that's added in the Red Book, external accounts, booster clubs, PTAs, PTOs are not allowed to charge dues, fees, or charges to students. A PTA can charge dues, but only to the amount that they have to send forward to their national, state, and local chapters. Okay, but they can't charge anything above that. PTOs can't charge dues or membership fees or any charges to the students or parents. Booster clubs cannot charge membership fees, dues, or any charges to students or parents. Okay, that's something new in the Red Book. Fundraisers, still got to do fundraisers forms. Now in this district, do all fundraisers have to be approved by the board or just school-wide? School-wide, okay. School-wide fundraisers are fundraisers that benefit all the kids in the school. So if it's a fundraiser that benefits all the kids in the school, that has to be approved by the principal and the board. If it's just a fundraiser benefiting the basketball team, the cheerleaders, the beta club, the academic team, that only has to be approved by the principal, okay? Now, principals at the elementary schools, if you have a PTA or PTO, typically their fundraising is there to benefit all the kids in the school. So your PTA, PTO fundraisers would have to be approved by the principal and the board also before they do them, okay? Now, fundraising is defined as an organized activity of soliciting and collecting money for school or student organizations. Now, some people says, well, we're asking for donations. We're soliciting donations. That's not fundraising. We're not selling something. No, if you're actively doing something to raise the money, then that's considered fundraising, even if it is soliciting donations, okay? And that's one thing that they wanted to stress in this version of the Red Book. And the fundraiser approval form, we changed it to the fundraiser and crowdfunding approval form. So basically what state is saying, if you're going to do a GoFundMe or a Donors Choose or anything like that, you still have to get approval before you can do it, if your district even allows them. Do you guys allow GoFundMes?
I think we just wrote a policy that allows some of that.
Some? Okay. So basically what the state is saying is, if you're going to do a GoFundMe and your district allows it, you also have to get approval because it is a fundraiser. Okay? And they added on the fundraiser approval form, what's your anticipated profit, and if you have excess funds, what are you going to spend it on? Okay? At one spot that says purpose of fundraising activity, that's basically saying what's your intended use of your profits, what are you raising the money for? You raise money for a purpose, you spend it for that purpose. Okay? Fundraising activities, if the students and the parents are working it, and it's going through the school, like I said earlier, it's got to benefit student activity. Students and parents cannot fundraise for operating expenses. You cannot have fundraisers at the school to supplement your staff account. Okay? The IRS disallows a nonprofit entity to fundraise for personal benefit. Everything in your staff account, your staff vending, your flower fund, that's for personal. You know, it's donuts for the staff meeting, it's meals for your staff, it's Christmas present for the staff, it's the retirement gift for the staff member that's retiring, it's flowers for bereavement, that's all personal stuff. That's why you cannot have fundraisers to fundraise to supplement your staff account. And something new that they put in the Red Book are the 3 ways you can legally generate monies for your staff account. That's profit from your vending machines that are used only by the staff, donations from the staff for that purpose, and donations from a third party that specify it's for the staff, and they got to put that in writing. Okay? That's the only 3 ways you can generate money for your staff vending or your flower fund account. Okay? Fundraising, if you're fundraising, raise money for a trip, a fee, a uniform, or whatever you're paying for. If fundraising is a source to generate the money for whatever you're paying for, it has to benefit the group, not the individual student. You're not allowed to keep student accounts. Okay? And that also applies to external clubs too. Now, you can track participation or hitting levels of selling for little incentives, you know, like a t-shirt, you know, some little prize. That's fine. But what's important is the fundraising doesn't personally benefit that kid that does the selling or the parent that does the selling. Okay, the fundraiser worksheet, they changed it to a fundraiser summary form. It looks a little different, but it's pretty much works the same way. Okay, I didn't have anything to do with that form. I didn't even modify it. I just left it alone. But the committee put that in there. All right. Inventory control worksheets, you got to do that for anything that keeps an inventory. Over time, you sell and replenish items. That's what you got to do inventory control worksheets for. So if you have athletic concessions going through your school activity fund checking account, you got to do inventory control worksheets at least once a month. You got pencil machines in the school, you got to do inventory control worksheets once a month. You have a school store, you have a bookstore, you got to do inventory control worksheets at least once a month. And the form that you fill out to turn that money in is Form 17. That's a form that's a sales from concessions, bookstore, pencil machine form. Now, I modified this form. I have one column here now for startup change. It says startup change, and you have your coins, your currency, checks, and your total. Then over here is your ending balances. So at the end of the night, here's what they fill out for their money that they've turned in. How much they have in coins, how much they have in currency, checks. You add it up, get the total, then you subtract your startup change out, and then that's your total sales. Okay, so now this worksheet makes a little more sense now. It's a little easier for them to understand how to fill it out. There is a little tally down here on the bottom, a tally sheet. It's all one page now. So if there's any other forms that you do make a two-part form, I would probably make Form 17 a two-part form, and then also the ticketed sales report, because that's the three forms that you turn money in on. So it's always good to have that as a two-part form too. So if you want to make those a two-part form, I'd probably do those right there. Okay. All right, ticketed sales. You got to sell tickets for any event that charges admission. And always use pre-numbered tickets. Always rotate ticket colors for consecutive events. Keep your tickets locked up, and always use the requisition report of ticket sales. I modified this report too, if you want to take a look at it. It's a portrait form now instead of landscape. You know, remember those two columns that said ticket seller's initials? You had two places you had to, I got rid of that. I just have a ticket seller signing down here on the bottom. I also got rid of gate 2 and 3. So now you just have advanced sales in the gate. I did add an extra row for other in case you wanted to have a senior citizens discount, you know, for a ticket, different price. All the math down here makes sense now. The form's real easy to figure out, and I got letters that shows if you put this total G, then total G goes down here. So it's easy to fill out, okay? So everything ties together and it makes sense. So I updated that form. Now we got some changes with ticketed sales. The principal can be the person in charge of sales. The old red book said the principal couldn't be the person in charge of sales, but sometimes the principal is the only administrator that's there. So the principal can be the person in charge of sales. And also with your change. Now this is something new, bookkeepers. You're going to have to start this basically right now. If you're going to write a check for startup money or change, you have to have an activity account labeled as startup or either change fund. Okay? And every time you issue startup money or change, it comes out of that activity account. That activity account always starts with a zero balance. So if you write a $1,000 check for gate money, gate change, then it comes out of your startup account. So guess what? That account goes to a negative 1,000. That negative amount stays negative until you receipt that change back in. So whatever that negative amount is at any time tells the principal, here's how much startup change is out. Okay? If you do another $500 for concession startup, you take it out of that account too. You don't take it out of the specific sport or the club or the library. You take it out of your startup activity account. So now you're down minus $1,500. So now at any time, principal knows if they look at that report and it says minus $1,500 and there's not a ball game, they ought to be able to go to the safe and there'll be $1,500 in startup change in there. Okay? If a librarian says, I need $100 for startup change for the book fair, you don't take it out of the library account, you take it out of startup or your change fund. Now you take another 100 out, now you're down negative $1,600. Then at the end of the season, when you receipt the money back in, it goes back up. By the end of the year, you're back to zero. Okay? It's easy to monitor. It can be checked. Every time we have a bookkeeper stealing monies, one thing that they'll always steal is your startup change because it's too hard to track. You know, some bookkeepers will take the football startup change out of the football account, then the basketball startup change out of the basketball account, and then the yearbook, you know, if they're selling and they need change, or the library, they take it out of their account. Pretty soon you got startup change coming in and out of all kinds of different accounts. My theory is if it's hard to monitor, then nobody's going to check it. If it's hard to look at, hard to figure out what's happening, nobody's going to check it. But if it's easy to monitor, then somebody will look at it. And we're doing it that way for accountability. So bookkeepers, you have to create an activity account labeled as your startup change, your startup, or either your change fund. And that's the account that your change comes out of. You're not allowed to transfer monies out of that account. You write your checks out, you receipt it back in. No transfers in or out of that account. Okay? We also added if you have non-paying customers come to the gate, like people that have passes or season passes, you don't issue them a ticket. But that's pretty much common sense. I don't know why they added that. So that's the new stuff on ticketed sales and startup change. Okay? Remember, you write your startup change to another responsible person, the athletic director or the coach, but you can't write it to the principal. There's only one instance where you can write a check out of your activity fund account to the principal, and that's for an authorized travel reimbursement for a trip involving students. Authorized means superintendent's designee approves it. That's probably not going to happen. And it has to be for a travel reimbursement for a trip involving students. It has to be that specific. So that's probably never going to happen either. So bookkeepers, you don't write any checks to your principals out of your activity accounts. State doesn't want to have, the principals have the ability to approve their own PO, sign their own PO, assign their reimbursement to get paid, sign their own checks, and then reimburse themselves without someone above them approving it. So you never write checks to your principals out of your activity accounts. Okay? Okay, donations. So we talked a little bit about the donation policy. But what is your threshold for accepting donations, Stephanie?
So less than 2,000 in the school.
So if you receive a donation of 2,000 or more, then that has to come directly up to Stephanie. Okay? If it's $1,999.99 or less, then you're allowed to receipt it into your activity fund. But make sure you put it into the right account that it was donated for. Now, we changed the donation acceptance form to the donation acknowledgement form. Also, you remember those donation acceptance forms that you had to do for every single donation? Well, now you don't have to do it unless it's over $250 or more. Okay? So if your donation is $200, you don't have to do a donation acknowledgement form. If it's $50, you don't have to do a donation acknowledgement form. But if it's $250 or above, then you have to fill out the donation acknowledgement form. Now, the reason we changed it to the donation acknowledgement form is because they do suggest that a donation acknowledgement should be sent to the donor. Well, we're going to use this acknowledgement form, this acceptance form, as your acknowledgement now. We added the federal ID number to it because that's what the customer that made the donation needs, the donor needs. They need your name, address, federal ID number, and how much they donated. So we added the federal ID number to it, and then down here where it used to say cash, check, real property, personal property, service, and other, we got rid of real property, personal property. We just have cash, check, amount. There is a spot for an amount now, or either other. Okay? Yep.
For this form and all other forms, we can add things to it.
You can add things to it, yes. You can always add.
Signature for our superintendents that he's acknowledged that we're ready to accept this.
Okay, yeah, you can do that. There is a principal's signature right there. And then we did add a signature line for a person accepting the donation. So the person that accepts the donation, we did add a line for that. So if the teacher, the coach, the sponsor, the principal, whoever accepts it, we do have a line, added a line for that. Okay? Now, gift cards. Everybody look me in the eye right here. You cannot buy them. You still cannot buy them, okay? I don't want anybody saying, Ron said we can buy gift cards now. No, you can't. You can't buy gift cards. But remember, the old frequently asked questions document did have a statement in there on gift cards that says if a third party wants to donate gift cards, that they have to come and donate them out, give them out themselves, that you're not allowed to accept them and give them out. We changed that. You can accept gift cards from a third party and you can give them out as they specify, so they don't have to come and give them out themselves now, okay? So you can accept gift cards from third parties.
Disagree on this one. We are not letting anyone know. We're not changing that.
That's fine, that's fine. But you can accept them, and we created a gift card log, so if you do get any gift cards donated to you, you just got to log them on the gift card log and fill that form out, okay? But you still cannot purchase gift cards with activity fund monies, period, okay? All right.
But we are not doing that, right?
No.
Okay.
We've agreed to disagree.
Talked about that at Flo Johnson Hospital. We are not doing that with the gift cards.
We're not. Thank you. We don't want to. We don't want to.
Okay.
Too much gas.
All right.
Too much possibility that something gets lost or someone gets accused.
Okay, charitable gaming. Does anybody in here have charitable gaming? No dope schools? No. Okay, the two things you need to stay away from are raffles and split the pots, okay? Don't do them. All right. We did add that you can do cakewalks now, so you can have cakewalks if you want, and it not be considered charitable gaming. Okay, with your expenditures, make sure you have your pre-numbered checks. Make sure no signature stamps on your checks or financial documents. Principal can have a designee. Just make sure they're another administrator. Don't pay sales tax. Don't reimburse sales tax. You got to have a standard invoice. If the person you're paying doesn't have an invoice, then you have to have a standard invoice. Standard invoice always takes the place of an original invoice. But if you are going to pay from a standard invoice, you have to have the principal and the payee's signature on that standard invoice. I did modify the standard invoice. You remember on the standard invoice, it used to say vendor signature and then it had person receiving check. I got rid of person receiving check, so that's not on there anymore. That's the only thing we changed on the standard invoice. Got rid of that person receiving check line. Let's see, anything else change?
We can say mailed in now, right? Or mailed.
Yeah, you can say that you mail a check out right there. You know, so if you do mail a check, you know, to a parent, you don't have to mail that standard invoice out and get them to sign it. You can say mailed check on that standard invoice, okay? Outstanding checks, you're not allowed to keep outstanding checks officially now over 12 months. So bookkeepers don't usually I say at 6 months start checking on them. And if you have any that are 12 months or older, you need to void them and deal with them, okay? If you're going to issue a check to or refund to a student or parent, use that standard invoice form. If you don't have an original invoice. Can't hold checks more than 3 business days. I don't know why they added that, because the Red Book says to mail them out the day you sign them. So I don't know why they added that to it. Purchasing hasn't changed. We did put a new PO in the Red Book, and there is a spot for model procurement stuff in there. I think the most important change on this PO is this right here, principal signature date. There is a place now for the principal to, there always was a place for the principal to sign, but there was never a date line next to it. Now there's a date line, so now, and the most important thing when principals are signing a PO is it before the purchase was made? So now there's a place for you to put the date. So make sure you date your POs. Nothing has changed for advances, but we did change the report from the expense report. Well, now we call it the advance report because that's the only time you use the expense report is for advances. So remember, the only time you can do an advance is if you have students going on a trip with a sponsor, a coach, or a teacher. That's the criteria. A student has to be traveling on the trip. You can't do advances for people to go shopping or just buy stuff, okay? The only time you do an advance, students have to be on the trip. Nothing in payment for services have changed. Petty cash you're not allowed to have. Credit cards, nothing in credit cards changed. Fixed assets, nothing changed there either. Allowable expenditures, we do have some changes in allowable expenditures. You can pay for playground equipment now with activity fund monies, like I said earlier. You can pay for band instruments with activity fund monies. You can pay for library books with activity fund monies now. We added athletic field striping, quick dry materials, and staff meals out of your staff generated funds you can pay for. To the travel expenses for travel expenses and meals consumed by the student members and their adult sponsors and bus drivers. We added bus drivers to that. So, and I think we even talked about that here last time we did a Red Book session. I remember talking about bus drivers. But you can pay for their bus drivers' travel expenses when it's an official school trip traveling with children. Okay, I went to bat for the coaches. I got tired of standing up here saying you couldn't pay for that $30 Jimmy Reed card. So I got the committee so I said, we got these coaches out there that are coaching these teams for this little piddly stipend sometimes, and we can't get them a $30 coaching card. I said, that's ridiculous. I said, let's all approve this little $30 card so that, at least they don't have to pay for it themselves. So, you can buy coaches cards, that Jimmy Reed card, that Kentucky High School Coaches Association card with activity fund monies, but only for district employees who are specifically paid for coaching duties. Okay? So your paid coaches, you can buy that $30 card with activity fund monies now. Okay? But they have to be a paid coach, not an administrator, not a volunteer, but if they're a paid coach, you can buy that $30 card for them now. Okay? Something that they did change, promotional credits. Where's the athletic director at? AD, where you at? There you are. Do you guys get any vendor credits like when you buy uniforms? Do you have a contract where you get a credit? Who do you buy your uniforms and attire from? Who? So do they give you a credit if you buy so much stuff, or because you got a contract, do you get a credit? That credit now has to benefit students. He didn't even want to answer me. Hey, I'm not your wife. Oh, he doesn't know? Oh, okay. I thought maybe he thought I was his wife, trying to get something out of him. No. If you do receive any credits because of the purchases that you make, those credits have to benefit students, not the coaching staff or sponsors. Okay? So all vendor credits have to benefit the students, the teams, not the adult sponsors and coaches. All right?
The credit you talking about in monies, or like you pay so much you get some?
I know there's a lot of vendors out there. They say if you buy all your sporting goods and your attire from us, we'll give you a $5,000 credit to where you can use that to buy anything you want up to $5,000. And then a lot of times what ends up happening is they end up buying all the coaches' attire and all their stuff, So if you do have a credit, it's got to benefit the students, not the adult sponsors and coaches. Okay? One thing I do want to stress on attendance incentives, that hasn't changed, but if you're going to buy an attendance incentive and use activity fund money, you have to buy something instructional in nature. Okay? Everybody remember that. If any part of the criteria to receive the incentive is because of attendance, then you have to buy something instructional in nature. Book, educational software, calculator, pen, pencil, paper. You cannot buy t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, bicycles, toys, games, ice cream, snacks, pizza parties, trips to McDonald's, trips to Dairy Queen. You cannot pay for those things for attendance incentives. Okay? Ron's rule of thumb, if they're excited about getting it, you can't buy it for attendance. All right? So if you're getting something they're excited to get, then you're probably breaking the law. Attendance is compulsory. They have to come to school by law. So what the state's saying is you can't reward or incent kids with non-instructional incentives or rewards to come to school. Now, if a third party, like a PTA or PTO, wants to buy those items and donate it for that purpose, then they can. But you can't buy it with activity fund monies. Now, kids don't have to get A's. They don't even have to behave. They just got to show up. So if you want to buy academic or behavioral rewards or incentives that are non-instructional, you can. But if attendance is any part of the criteria to receive the incentive or reward and you're using your activity fund money to make that purchase, you have to buy something instructional in nature. You can also do an instructional field trip. You can do that. Okay? Other things, now, this right here, we're not saying you can. This bullet used to say alcoholic beverages, tobacco products, controlled substances, weapons and what was it? Weapons. It was weapons and something else. Firearms. Weapons and firearms. We took weapons and firearms off of that because archery, and there's some schools now starting trap shooting. But you still can't buy beer, cigarettes, and drugs with activity fund money. And don't say I said you could. You can't do it. We did add that you cannot pay for regular care and upkeep of school property with activity fund money. We added that payment or reimbursements of costs associated with parents, volunteers, or chaperones participating on school trips are disallowed. The only time that it's allowed for a chaperone is if you have a district policy and in writing it says that we have a adult to student ratio that we have to have. Now, if you have a policy that states that, and if you have a chaperone that you have to go on that trip that meets that criteria for that policy, then you can reimburse or pay for travel expenses for that chaperone with student-generated monies. Okay? But you have to have that policy in place if you're going to do that. Did add that state tournament tickets and associated expenses for non-students, that would be the coaches, the adults, the teachers, the administrators, are disallowed unless the school student or team is participating in the tournament. So you can't pay for state tournament tickets and related expenses unless the school's team or a student is participating in the event. Okay? Fundraising or crowdfunding for an individual's or family's personal benefit is disallowed. Here's once again where the IRS comes into play. A nonprofit can't fundraise for personal benefit. So you're not allowed to have fundraisers to raise money for an individual or a family's personal benefit. Things like bereavement, illness, injury, natural disaster, extreme loss, etc. I know sometimes it's the right thing to do, but you can't have fundraising events because the IRS won't allow a nonprofit entity to fundraise for personal benefit. Okay? Inactive balances. Now, there's something in the old Red Book that I never really did stress when I did Red Book training. Principals, if you have activity accounts that have sat inactive for 12 months or longer, no money coming in, no money going out, you got a small balance just sitting there, If it's been inactive for 12 months or longer, then you're supposed to, actually it says the principal shall transfer that balance to an account that benefits all kids in the school and zero that account out. Okay? So principals, if you have inactive accounts, you are supposed to transfer that to an account that benefits all students, usually the general fund. They transfer it to the general fund account, and then you zero those old inactive accounts out. Okay? So you may want to do that. Title IX, nothing has changed. Electronic receipts and payments, nothing's changed. Transfers, we did add that if a staff or sponsor separates from their school, whether by transferring to another school, retirement, or any other cause, any goods, capital assets, donations, or other items received during the staff or sponsor's tenure shall remain at the departing school for the benefit of that activity. So basically what that's saying is teachers and coaches and sponsors don't accumulate stuff for that school personally or that student group personally. It's for that school or student group, and when they leave, it stays at that school. Okay? On carrying money over from year to year, you know, I always stress your ending balances, principals, for your activity counts should not be continually climbing. You want your ending balance to either be flat or decline. Actually, the least amount of money you carry over at year end, the better job you're doing managing your activity funds. That money has to be spent on activity, so there's no use saving it for a rainy day, and the state doesn't want you hoarding up your money. So if you have sponsors or teachers or coaches not spending their monies that they raise, then you need to limit their fundraising. Don't let them keep fundraising. Your goal basically is you raise money for a purpose, you spend it for that purpose. The kids that raise those funds should be the ones that benefit from that money. So your goal as a principal is not to have this huge activity fund balance at the end of the year, okay? I was at a middle school a couple months ago doing a review, and their general athletic account had $80,000 in it. I said, daggone, that's a lot of money for a general athletic account for a middle school. And I said, look at the beginning of the year, you had $65,000. I said, you've grown $15,000 this year. Principal, yeah, it just keeps growing. I said, well, you're charging $40 a kid an athletic fee to participate. I said, won't you stop charging that $40 fee, use this general athletic money for what you usually use that fee money for, let the kids participate for free, let that general athletic account decline. Once you get down to where you need to be in it, you know, maybe a few $1,000s, then you start charging a fee again. He says, yeah, that's a good idea. He goes, I just kept charging it because that's what we always did. So, like I said, you don't want to hoard up your money. If you have excess funds, spend it. Limit your fundraising, okay? Now, the Red Book, we did add that if you are going to carry money over, there's really only two reasons that you should carry money over for. If you raise funds for a future purpose, or if you need to have funds at the beginning of the fiscal year. So football, if you zero football out June 30th, you're going to be in trouble July 1 because you're going to spend all your money in July and August. So you need to carry money over for that sport, same way with soccer. You typically don't want to carry a bunch of money over from year to year. The kids that raise it should benefit from it. Now, you can have fundraisers for future purposes. And if you're saving money because you had a fundraiser for a future purpose and you carry it over, that's fine too. So they're saying that's really the only two reasons you really should be carrying a lot of money over. If you need it in the beginning of the next year, or if you raised it for a future purpose, okay? Other than that, your goal is to spend as much of that money as it's raised that year for the purpose it was raised for. We did change that. Now you can send electronic copies of your financial reports up to the board instead of sending paper copies up. So if you want to send PDFs up to Stephanie, you can do that now if she wants to implement that. Maybe you've already been doing that, I don't know. Do you guys, bookkeepers, when you send your reports up, do you send paper copies up? Stephanie, one thing that we did change, you are allowed to accept PDF copies of reports now from the schools instead of sending paper up all the time. Save paper. You know what? Principals, what's the probably two of the biggest expenses you have with your SBDM funds?
Copiers.
Copiers and paper. So if you can cut down on paper, you probably have more money to spend on educating kids. So if there's things you can do to be paperless, try to do those things. So you can receive PDFs on their reports instead of them sending paper copies up to you all the time. Okay. We did change the accounts receivables report Form 15B to an annual report only. You don't have to do that every month. I don't know if you guys did it every month, but it only has to be done annually now at year end. Okay. School banks didn't change, if anybody has them. With external accounts, we have some changes in external accounts. And I really wanted to stress this. All funds expended by a support or a booster organization shall be from their fundraising activities and donations. No dues, no fees, or charges shall be assessed to students or parents. So what that's saying is every single penny that your PTO, PTA, your booster club spend should come from their fundraising activities, not charging parents. Their job is to provide for, enhance, pay for things from their fundraising activities that the school can't charge or pay for themselves. So the school can charge a fee, but the board has to approve that. Board approves it, then it's got to be collected through the school and spent for the purpose the board approved it for. External accounts can't charge a fee, nor can they charge dues. Now, a PTA can charge dues per member, but they can only charge the amount that they have to pay forward to their national, state, and local chapters. Okay? They can't collect anything above that. So, your booster clubs, if your soccer boosters say, all right, we got a spirit pack that we want to buy for the kids. Spirit pack costs $75, but we only want to pay $50 of it. So we want to collect $25 from each parent, and then we'll give them a spirit pack. They can't collect that $25. The school can. The soccer coach can tell the principal we got a $25 charge for a spirit pack. Board approves that $25 charge for a spirit pack, then the soccer coach collects that $25 per student, per player, and then the boosters donate $50 per student to the school, and then the school buys the spirit pack. Okay? That's how it should work. Booster clubs cannot charge parents anything. Every penny they spend comes from their fundraising activities, not charging parents and students. Okay? Let's see, anything else change here? Okay. We did add for referees and officials that those checks have to be cut by the school if they're KHSA sanctioned games and they count on the schedule. Do you guys use Arbiter for scheduling?
Yes.
Do you use Arbiter for pay?
Yes, we're good.
You're going to?
I did last year, the rest of them are going to this year.
Yeah, Arbiter Pay, do you mail your checks to your...
That's how we had been.
You had been doing it? Yeah. I think if you're mailing checks, it's a no-brainer to go with Arbiter Pay. Yeah, because with Arbiter Pay, you don't have to worry about the W-9 forms. You don't have to worry about 1099s. You don't have to worry about purchase orders for every single ref. You don't have to worry about a standard invoice for every single ref. The principal doesn't have to sign those documents. You don't have to worry about voiding checks, and then you don't have to print about 500 or 600 checks.
Pages of refs for a single school.
Yeah.
And process was
Yeah. I think it's a no-brainer. Write one check to Arbiter, and then you guys just authorize payment and they pay them. That way, even if you did have an employee that refereed games for the district, Arbiter pays them. You don't have to go through payroll on it either. So I think it's a pretty good deal. We did add that booster clubs shall not pay or enhance salaries or stipends, nor can they create paid positions. You know, they can't fundraise and create a paid position and pay it themselves. Okay? The school board has to create all positions. The school board has to set that stipend and it be in the stipend schedule, and that stipend has to be paid through payroll at the board. Okay? External accounts cannot create positions and pay their own stipends, nor can they supplement a stipend. Okay? Now this is new and it may affect the PTAs. External accounts cannot reimburse district employees for purchase for personal and booster club purchases. Okay? Now, when that says external accounts, that's talking about PTAs, PTOs, booster clubs. Do we have any PTAs here that tell the teachers, you can buy up to $100 worth of materials. You give us the receipt and we'll reimburse you. Can't do that anymore. Now what they can do is they can donate $100 per teacher to the school. You put it in your activity account, then a teacher gets a PO and buys the stuff. Okay? Yeah.
Another solution would be they can provide a list and teacher can mark it off and they do all the purchasing.
That's another option. So yeah, the PTA can make a list and say, okay teachers, what's your dream list? Tell us what you want, we'll go ahead and buy it for you. They can do that too, okay? But what they can't do is tell the teacher, go out and buy it yourself, bring us the receipts and we'll write you a check and reimburse you. Can't do that. And that came sort of by default. Where the real issue was with coaches making purchases for booster clubs and then booster clubs reimbursing coaches. And then you had situations where sometimes booster clubs were paying coaches for things, but they said it was a reimbursement, and it really wasn't a reimbursement. They're really just enhancing a stipend or a salary or giving them more money. So the PTAs, PTOs sort of fell into that same problem there. So we can't have booster clubs reimbursing coaches for purchases that they make for the booster organization. One, the Red Book always did state that district employees cannot spend their money. If the coach is buying stuff and getting reimbursed by the booster club, then they're spending their money. They can't purchase things for them. They can't order their product. So with a booster club, coaches cannot go out and buy anything and then give a receipt to the booster and say, here, reimburse me for it. Okay? Same way with the PTAs, the PTOs. They can't do that either. So there's no reimbursing from external accounts to a district employee. Okay? Let's see, anything else change? I think that's, we did change that the annual financial reports for the PTAs, PTOs, and booster clubs don't have to be turned in until July 25th. And you know what district caused that? Your all's PTAs. I can remember that one PTA woman said, we need the 15th, is too early. You know, because of the holidays, can you change that to the 25th? So I changed that just because of her. So I'll see her tonight probably. So we changed. Now this year, your financial reports from your external account is supposed to be in July 15th. But next year, it's not due till July 25th. I think that's it. So I went over every single change that was in the Red Book, whether it be an addition, a deletion, or a modification. And like I said, that Red Book's probably going to come out by August 1. All right? If you're going to print out new forms, I would use the existing ones you got, like the two-part forms. Like if you have two-part multiple receipt forms, I'd probably use those until you run out. But the other forms that you maybe photocopied, you can change those and start using those as soon as the Red Book forms come out. Now I can email you the Excel document because I've got that, because I made the changes, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So I'll email that to you, and then you can. The only thing is you may want to change the color of them to black, because some of the changes are in red still.
Yeah, that'll be easy.
So yeah, just change the color. So I'll email that to you. Okay, so that's all I got. I went through all the changes. If anybody's got any questions,